Thank you for joining another session of Basefield in 5. This video is all about refresh settings. And of course, we're back in event operations in my local development environment. So we can walk through a bunch of these features. And refresh settings is this button up here on the top right. And pretty simply, the button allows you to control when you're getting data from the back end. If you see this green mode, that means you're in automatic. Blue means manual. These are the two different ways that you can query data, and you can switch between the two quite quickly just by using that drop down. You see here that the check mark means nothing's happening, and if I click this, it'll request that data from the back end, and it'll show that loading indicator when it's actually running. But let's dive into some settings. As I said, this is going to control the query to the back end data, but it includes a little bit more than just automatic and manual. Generally speaking, these settings, which also can be included in filter templates, of course, are a little more for advanced users. So what you'll see here is some defaults that, of course, that we come with. Refresh settings dialog here is accessible via that dropdown. And generally speaking, you shouldn't be changing too many of these things as like a normal user. But this gives you the opportunity to tune the environment, the application that you're looking at in a couple of very tangible ways, right? First off, one of the things that we supply here is the latest information. So, how many events were returned or cases were returned, the number of different pages that we've included, the status, when it was done, the type of query that was done, a little information about it being in manual refresh mode. Another way you can see that is we have this hover over. So if you're ever curious on when's the last time, if you're in manual mode, when's the last time you queried, you get that, indicator that is showing that it was two minutes ago. Another thing to quickly note here is that if we ever have an issue with the query where there's some reason that it wouldn't be running, you're going to get a little indicator. And one of the ways we can, that typically occurs is that you don't have any objects selected. So if we go over to tree mode here and apply 0 selections here, we see we have 0 of 13 selected. We're not going to get any results, but we're also going to get this little warning indicator that's going to tell you something wrong with the query on why you're not returning anything. And one of the most common ways that users get tripped up by that is basically by not having selected. So if we jump back over to classic view just to have a select all situation, you'll see that error will go away, and we'll be able to query with no issues, right? So typically, most real-time users will be looking, at event operations in an automatic refresh type of scenario. But occasionally you'll be looking potentially at some events in the past or some specific query where you don't want it to constantly be changing what you see, and manual option is there for you to make sure you get that. In later releases, we're eyeing the ability to include streaming events. So whenever someone interacts with something or whenever an alarm occurs, you'll get pushed to the page that you're looking at, and that'll be included in the automatic mode. So there's a couple of settings here with regards to refresh. One is, of course, the refresh interval. This comes at default at 60 seconds. And why that's default 60 seconds is that typically your basic filters will include, 7 days of data. If you're a large installation, you might have hundreds of thousands of objects. So you're quickly reaching millions and millions of events that you're going to be querying against, and that can take some time. So our default is 60 to try and protect the user from, asking the database tons and tons of information. But you can change that once you start dialing in your filters. You'll see this little warning pop up kind of describing what I just said. The fastest interval that we allow here is 5 seconds. So you can set something as long as you know that it's going to be returning in an appropriate manner. And you can always try it out and see how it goes, and then adjust these settings and, like I was saying before, save it to a filter template. The next option here is the number of events to query, right? And this is pretty simply, how many events you want to get. It's also controlling how many things are going to render on the page. Default, we're going to go with 100. And in this fixed event query mode that we'll talk about in a little bit, we'll basically just let you see those 100. So if you're going to select all, those would be those 100. You know, if you had a site with 180 turbines and you wanted to grab 180 events because you were looking for a certain scenario, this is where you'd want to jump in here and make sure you're including everything that you're expecting to have. You can quickly increase this number, obviously. But with that said, we're going to stop here and break the rest of refresh settings into a part 2 video. So I'll see you in the next one.